All right, welcome to Lightning Cox at RubyConf 2024. This is often the most exciting / interesting part of the show. Each show is different. Don't know what we're going to get this time, but I'm excited about the lineup that we have tonight of 14 5-minute talks, 5 minutes or less. And I do have a gong, and I will be ringing it if you go over your 5 minutes. Just setting that out now. So let's just get right into it. Our first two speakers, we're going to start with Noah, who's going to tell us about Intro to Langchain.rb. And we have Sunjay, who's going to tell us about Advance, how to propel the next generation of technologists. So could I have those two please up on the stage?
All right, so my name is Noah, and I'm gonna be, you may recognize me from Who Wants to Be a Ruby Engineer this morning. And I'm gonna give a quick intro to Langchain.rb. So I'm new to Ruby and programming. I started at Turing School this past March and graduated in September. Learned backend development, Ruby on Rails. Partway through the program, I ended up in an internship from meeting some people at a meetup, working on an AI-powered restaurant recommendation app. And one of the things that we worked with was the OpenAI API, and it was really cool what it could do, how it powered the application. But one thing that we realized was that it wasn't very flexible the way we had implemented it. And it would be fun to be able to experiment with all the other LLMs out there. The space is moving so quick, and there's different options, so it'd be nice to try those out. And so I got the chance to go to Rocky Mountain Ruby and heard a talk about Langchain.rb, and it seems like it solves some of these problems that we were facing. So at the most basic level, Langchain.rb is a gem that lets you interact with LLMs. You can see here that I create a new instance of the LLM and request chat completion at the bottom. And this is what that chat completion looks like. And what we can do is switch it out for Claude in this example, and you just change 2 lines of code. So back here, it said OpenAI, and the API key was OpenAI API. But over here, it's Claude. It's just 2 lines, and we get a different response. So we can experiment really fast and quick with all the different models out there. This was just the OpenAI and Anthropic models, but you can do it with Mistral, Gemini, Ollama. You can run local models. It's really cool. So that's the first advantage. The second thing I wanted to talk about is assistants. So assistants are threads that you can start with, not thread as a computer thread, but just like a conversation thread with the LLM that you give specific instructions to. And with these assistants, you can give tools to as well. And tools extend the functionality of the LLM. They can get real-time data. An example would be using a math tool that uses a calculator instead of just using the LLM itself. So you get much more accurate data. To show an example of this, I went back to a Turing project called Sweater Weather, where we would use an API for directions, giving 2 cities, calculating the distance, and getting the weather upon arrival. So you could say, do I need a sweater when I arrive in New York, or something like that. So to do this, I gave the assistant access to 2 different tools. One tool to get directions, and so that's here. I define the parameters that go in, the name of the function, and in this case, the assistant chooses when it gets to use the tool. So it's not you, the user, defining when it uses the tool to get the directions. It'll just decide, I need to find the directions, I'm going to use this tool, and that tool works however you programmed it. In this case, it just makes a call to the MapQuest API to get those directions. So here's that tool right there. You can see it's just making a simple API call. And here's the coordinates, same sort of thing, getting the location. And here's where we actually give access to those tools. You can see on the bottom 2 lines, defining the tools that it has access to. And here's an example of that. I don't know if it's playing. So I start the app in my terminal, give a question for directions and the weather when I arrive based on when I leave. It does all the calls that it needs to do. This part takes a little while, but basically it's asking for the directions, calculating the time, and then asking for the time when you arrive. And here we get the response back. It calculated that all for us, and we didn't tell it to use those tools. It just decided to. So I think this could be really fun. It's an easy way that you can add LLMs into your applications. There's a ton more that I didn't talk about here, but go check it out.
Well, I'm going to start before the timer starts. Hi, good evening. My name is Sunjay. I am a software engineer based in Central North Carolina, and I'm proud to be joining you this evening as a RubyConf scholar. So huge shout out to the Ruby Central team, the wonderful welcoming Ruby community here tonight, and as well as my guide, Fred. Thanks, Fred. And I also want to say thanks to the many generous sponsors that made my very first technical conference possible. So tonight I'd like to start with a very simple question. How did you get here? So how did you get where you are today in your career? So when I reflect on that question, I know that I'm here in large part because of the generous people that made it possible for me to be here, those who chose to advance my career. And they were visionaries like my mentor, Amy, who can handle the strange and very curious mind of a designer turned engineer. There were also leaders like Chelsea, who really showed me the ropes and showed me how to take a positive outlook. They were friends like my friend Peter, who's with me tonight, and still answers questions I have about Ruby. But unfortunately, my experience is not shared across the board. There are still many out there trying their best, but only kicking up dirt. As my friend Adam McCrea would put it, they're stuck in the middle. And for those stuck in the middle, leveling up feels like a corn maze. And identifying a mentor is extremely complex. Finding a job is really discouraging. Now, on the other side of this, not only are junior and mid-level technologists struggling to level up, but your company's bottom line is also at stake. So without a thriving pool of junior and mid-level technologists, your company will have less diversity of ideas over time, and you also solve fewer problems for your customers. So when I see a decrease in talent, a decrease in innovation, and a decrease in solutions, to me, the simple math is nothing but trouble. So tonight, I'd like to invite you to join me in drawing a line in the sand. So, hold on. There we go. Yeah, sorry about that. I would like to invite you to draw a line in the sand with me. So basically what I'm saying, enough is enough. No more floundering engineers, no more waning bottom lines, no more stuck talent. Tonight, like the wonderful humans that were part of my journey, let's choose to advance the next generation of technologists. So a few ways that we can do that is we can create opportunities for those ahead of us and behind us. So if your company's hiring, you can advocate for junior and mid-level talent. You can also help review resumes and hold whiteboarding interviews. And another thing that you can do if you find yourself as a early career technologist, you too can advance the next generation of technologists by swapping resumes and making introductions to your network. Another way to do this is you can share your domain and technical knowledge through pair programming. You can also help demystify those weird words that only people in your industry use. You can write blogs and also write very helpful PR comments to just say like, looks good to me, but like actually say what are the next clear steps. And finally, we can invest in mentorship and cultivate relationships. So make friends like what we're doing here this week, be mentored, mentor others, make other mentees and mentors. In fact, I I spoke with Andy at Ruby Friend, First Ruby Friend this past week, and he said they have a huge need to fill for new mentors on their platform. So we have lots of opportunity to act now. So I rolled all of these 4 points into something that I'm calling the Advanced Manifesto. So please pull out your phones, don't be shy. You can scan the QR code on the screen or go to advancedmanifesto.com and you can sign a pledge. And by joining tonight, you can join me in rethreading the very fabric of our industry. This is a great first step to advancing the next generation of technologists. So again, to wrap up here, so together we can create opportunities for those ahead of us and behind us. We can share our knowledge, both our domain and technical knowledge. We can invest in mentorship, and we can cultivate relationships. Also, as an added bonus, if you sign while we're here in Chicago and you come see me, I'll give you one of these fancy stickers. They're holographic, so definitely come and see me. And I would also love to talk to you about this topic. Again, that website is advancedmanifesto.com. Thank you so much for being the lovely people who made it possible for me to advance in my career. Cheers, my friends.
Hello, I'm Manu. Can come say hi to me on LinkedIn or in person. And I have been working as a backend software engineer for almost 2 years at a nonprofit. And before that, I worked for a long time as a graphic designer. And I'm here today to talk about software engineering and graphic design. So they are actually very similar. How you work, what you do is kind of different, but the process of how you get to end results is very similar. And what is that process? It is about figuring out how to best communicate through media. So how to get a message across to other people using media. Or if you want to think about it from a practical point of view, it's thinking about you, your client, what they want to achieve, to communicate, their users, customers, technical and budget limitations, amongst many other things. And this process is design. So, of course, there are going to be differences. We are dealing with different medias, with paper versus bits and bytes. But I think the big one is that at some point, graphic design projects tend to be done. And the way they evolve and die is different than digital projects. So what does that process look like for graphic design? I'll show some short examples from an exhibition I worked on. It was about telling the story of the museum from its documents. There were many decisions that we made based on different needs from the museum and its users. From the many documents came the decision to use different typographies. It was a way to evoke that sort of messy feeling that documents can have. And then there were technical decisions, like when deciding what text size placement, we were always thinking if it would be comfortable to read, too high, too low, too small, too big. And for the catalog, we made some cutouts. You could mix and match document parts and mix and match the title itself, like the same way we did in other pieces. And on the technical side, one paper might be more comfortable for reading, one for photo printing, so we chose different papers. When you do that, you need to think about the quantity of pages, because printers usually work with 16, 32, 48 pages booklets. And even taking this and much, much more into consideration, not everyone's going to like it, and some people are going to be very passionate about it. So how does this translate to engineering? It's the same as before. You are still using media to communicate. So you are still thinking about your client, what they want to achieve and communicate, their users' technical and budget limitations. And when you think about Ruby, when it was first created, it had one user, and that user's needs, wants were to make a scripting language, to make it OOP, to take from a few different languages, to bring him joy. And those were some of the things that guided him in his choices. But more people were interested. And here we are now, over 30 years later. Ruby's needs have changed, because now instead of one user, we have a whole community. So now instead of one user's needs guiding its choices, is the community's needs guiding its choices. So the way it's designed has changed, and I think here the big difference comes back. It's alive, and I think that's super cool. What I like the most about software development is how projects can feel like living things. So you can go back and see things that were adopted, changed, dropped, and all because of the users' needs, the community. So all that said, whether it's one person or a community, graphic design or software engineering, it's all about process, interaction, communication between people. It's all still media. And I really like this quote from Matt's from an old interview. Don't underestimate the human factor. Even though we are in front of the computers, they are media. We are working for human with human. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex, and this is How to Be a Ruby Scholar, Do a Project, and Accidentally Break Your Laptop. So first off, who am I? I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. I'm a software engineer at Colrail, and I'm a Ruby Scholar and first-time RubyConf attendee. Okay, so we're gonna begin at the end. That right there is a broken laptop screen and also a broken heart because I was simply just doing normal programming activities, and I might have gone a little too hard this time. Just joking. This was simply like a freak accident. And yeah, so yeah. So what exactly was I doing and how do we get here? So essentially I was building a chat app for RubyConf, and it was called Rails Talk. It is a chat app for chatters made by a professional chatter. And my goal with it was essentially to build a platform to facilitate community, basically allow people to create a community and facilitate that community just being able to chat about stuff. So I did some brainstorming on what I needed, found a guide, and I worked through it. And this is what I got. As you can see, this is a chat room about recipes, and Gordon Ramsay and Marco Pierre White are talking to one another. I already have celebrity endorsement. It's really great. So let's talk about features and takeaways. So features in this app are that you can sign in, you can create a room, there's group chats, and then there's private chats. Things that I learned about sessions, action cable, turbo, and authentication. All really cool things. And lastly, like, what would I like to add? Because I didn't really get to finish it because my laptop broke. And I didn't get my laptop until an hour before my flight. So I would like to add the ability to remove users and also clean the app up, because the app does cool things, but it kind of looks not great, or it doesn't look the way I want it to. So I'm just going to show off some of those features. So this is a user signing in. This user is Gordon Ramsay. He's a small-time cook. I don't know if you guys know about him. And this is the other feature. This is so showing an index of rooms and also showing that you can actually create a room and you can add to that list of rooms. And then the next thing is a private chat, which is between Gordon Ramsay and Marco Pierre White. And this is Gordon spamming Marco, and he's obviously doesn't want to talk to Gordon. And that's honestly it. My laptop works now, and thank you all.
Hi, everybody. I'm Neil. I'm a scholar as part of the Scholars and Guides program here. I went through the same boot camp that Noah, the first speaker, did. And I'm going to talk about a subject that I have a lot of experience with, and that is data visualization, specifically interactive data visualization. And I'm going to do that through the medium of JavaScript and the HTML5 canvas. What is data visualization? You can show how variables are related, find trends. On the right, we've got the S&P 500. On the left, we have the correlation between temperature and number of sales. And these are just hypotheticals on the left. You can create visual interpretations of large data sets that might be difficult to interpret otherwise, such as this map of the United States, this population density map. Or you can take data from, for example, a company's sales and get a visualization of where your revenue is coming from through something like a bar chart. But why would we want JavaScript, HTML, and CSS? Well, HTML and CSS allow for precise placement of elements on a screen using simple syntax. So it's really just giving you a simple way to put things where you want them. And then the JavaScript allows for interactivity, interacting with the document object model, the HTML. And this provides the ability for users to change inputs. And the final thing before we get into our examples here is the HTML5 canvas. This is a relatively new technology that uses primitives to create images. In 2 dimensions, it uses things like lines, ellipses, text, or you could just edit pixels individually. On top, we have the Mandelbrot set, and on bottom, we have a 3D rendering of Perlin noise, which you can also do with the HTML5 canvas. This is a data visualization I made of the spread of disease over time. The red line here represents the number of people infected. Blue is the number of people susceptible to being infected, and the green is number of people recovered. I figured this would be relevant coming, out of COVID. Everybody went through that. We all know what it was like. On the bottom, we have time. I forgot to label that, sorry. The bottom axis is time, and the left axis is number of people. So the population of the US is about 300 million, and this is over the course of about 100 days. These are the differential equations used to create this graph. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these, but we use JavaScript to solve these differential equations, and now it's time to make it interactive using JavaScript. So you can use sliders to adjust different parts of these differential equations, such as the transmission rate here. As transmission rate goes up, the disease spreads more quickly. As recovery rate decreases, people stay sick for longer, and the disease spreads to more people. As it gets lower, it takes longer for the disease to spread. The number of people initially infected essentially just determines the incubation time for the disease. And the number of people initially immune also just kind of affects everything. Obviously, less people will be infected if there are more that are initially immune. And then one phenomenon that I found when I was looking through the papers to learn about this model is that the ratio of transmission rate to recovery rate, when it is greater than 1, so in other words, when beta on the left is greater than gamma on the right at the top there, the disease doesn't spread, and you end up only infecting here 30 people. So this is available online, and I'm going to leave 30 seconds here for anybody to take a picture if they want. I didn't use a QR code because it is not mobile friendly. I spent 4 hours on this. I wasn't about to put a ton of effort into making it mobile friendly, but you can play with it if you want, and I would encourage many of you to experiment with the canvas element and create graphics on the front end. It's really fun, and yeah, so there you go. Thank you.
So this is the error screen that broke me. It's okay if you can't read it or can't understand it, because neither can I. I was making a simple change to our marketing site, which was built with Next.js. And I had committed the unforgivable sin of putting a div inside of a p tag. It's embarrassing and shameful, I get it. And this was really just kind of the final straw that made me decide to rebuild our marketing site for the 4th time. But this time I decided I was going to use Rails. Now, you might think Rails for a marketing site, is it overkill? Is it the wrong tool for the job? I hope to convince you that it isn't, or at least get you to rethink an assumption that I've had for a long time, which is that content sites should be static sites. Now, what do I mean by content sites? I mean, a personal website, a marketing website, anything with just some landing pages, maybe a blog, maybe some documentation. For a long time, I assumed this was the way. If I didn't use just static HTML files for this kind of site, I was somehow a bad person, a bad developer. And admittedly, static sites are great. They are simple, fast, and cheap because there's no moving parts. There's no work to do. There's just shipping HTML to a browser, right? But we don't write every single HTML file by hand, and that is where static site generators come in. They give us some layouts, some templating tools that produce the static HTML that we can then throw on any web server. But static site generators do come with a cost because the magic of generating that HTML needs to happen somewhere. And static site generators move that from the runtime to the build time, which is totally fine. It's just not free. Like any other tool, there's always going to be a learning curve. And if you're already fluent in those tools, that's fantastic. I wasn't. I kept trying to pick the right tool for the job, but I was moving slow. I was frustrated. I realize now that instead of the right tool for the job, what I really needed was the right tool for the team. Because the team is who writes and maintains the code, right? And my team is all Rails devs. There's just 3 of us. We're a tiny team, and we're gonna have different needs than some other teams. And for us, Rails makes a lot of sense. We're fluent in it. We're very fast with it. But as the saying goes, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I say, so what? If it helps us move fast and brings us joy, I'm gonna be okay with that. So we've now migrated from Next.js to Rails. So let's do a quick comparison between these 2 sites. Looking at some basic performance metrics, they both performed pretty well, but Rails was noticeably faster, thanks to it being a minimal Rails app, no database, mostly just markdown files. And deployment speed, similar. The Rails build was 35 seconds on Heroku. The Next.js build was 1.5 minutes on Netlify. Hosting is where static sites really shine because you can't beat free, and there are a lot of free options for static sites. I would argue that a $7 basic dyno on Heroku or something similar on Render or another platform is really just a rounding error for any marketing site. So I'm gonna call it mostly a wash there. Let's also look at scaling, because if our blog posts go viral, we need to make sure that we can scale up to handle it. Again, it's hard to beat static HTML here, but a lightweight Rails app can scale really well. And as a safety net, you can always add in auto-scaling. We're an auto-scaling company, so of course we dog food our own product. Kind of a moot point on our marketing site because we've never needed more than a single dyno. But let's go back to what sent us down this path. What happens if we put a div inside of a p tag on our new Rails app, right? Oh, it just renders. It's still invalid HTML. You still shouldn't do it, but it doesn't blow up, and that's nice. So am I saying all static site generators are bad and you should use Rails for everything? Definitely not. Static site generators are great tools. They might be perfect for your team. There is no right tool for the job. The question is, what tools will help your team move fast? And maybe you decide that websites and web apps are all just nails and grab your favorite hammer. Scan this for a video I made all about our new marketing site and my contact info. I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Elsh. I'm exploring XAI's potential at Iowa State University. So I'm going to explain what that means. Okay, imagine a world where decisions are profoundly made that affect our lives, whether in healthcare, hiring, criminal justice, are all made by machines. And those machines make decisions that humans can't understand why. So as AI becomes more universal, these scenarios are increasingly real. And the question becomes, how can we trust AI systems when their decisions are opaque? That's where explainable AI comes in. Okay, who here knows about the Compass dataset? If you don't, let me explain. So in 2016, an AI algorithm was used in the United States criminal justice system to predict the likelihood of defendants reoffending. And the system, it was called Compass. That's an abbreviation, and it was meant to help judges make informed decisions about bail and sentencing. But here's the catch. The algorithm the algorithm's decision-making process was completely hidden. And when journalists investigated, they found Compass was disproportionately labeling Black defendants as high risk, even when they hadn't reoffended. Meanwhile, white defendants who had committed future crimes were more often labeled low risk. So this opacity in decision-making and the impact it had on people's lives exposed the glaring need for explainability and interpretability. I'm going to dive into the definitions. Okay, what does interpretability refers to? So let's think of a simple linear regression that predicts housing prices. So you can look at the weights of each variable, such as bedroom numbers or the zip code where that house location is in. So we would know what's affecting the price directly. That's interpretability. And when we go to explainability, it's more one step further. It's about generating explanations and that are meaningful to humans. For example, imagine a doctor using an AI system to diagnose a cancer. And the doctor doesn't need a prediction. They need to know why the AI made the decision it made. So if the AI decided to name like one disease, the doctor would need to know why so that they can make a well-informed judgment. That's explainability. Okay, explainable AI in action. So in 2018, Google developed an AI model to diagnose diabetic retinopathy. So that was the leading cause of blindness. But it wasn't enough for ophthalmologists to just know if that scan of the eye is like suggesting this disease or not. So Google created a heat map overlay that highlighted the areas in the retinal image so that they made this AI decision more explainable. But there's more to this than just making things easier to understand. Explainable AI uncovers biases, helps us make ethical choices, and enables AI systems to be audited and improved. A compelling example would be if you asked for like a credit loan or a loan and you'd be denied by just saying you have low creditworthiness. It doesn't explain much. So you would need to know if there was a bias against your zip code, against your age, against your gender. An explainable AI system can point out specific factors that led to that decision. So what you can do, if you're a machine learning developer, incorporate explainability from the start. If you're designing an AI system, you can promote model transparency. And you can start from easier models and go to the complex ones by integrating transparency into it. If you're working at an org that uses AI, you can push for an audit of bias and fairness. And if you're attending RubyConf, make sure to advocate for interdisciplinary collaborations, engage in global discussions and policymaking, and educate and share knowledge. Thank you. This is my lecture.
Yeah, so it's really great to be here. That was a great talk. That was really fantastic. That was very, very serious and very, very good content and high quality slides. I really liked it. My name is Benjamin Fleischer. I work for a company called XPE, where my title is Principled Developer. It was originally a typo. I try not to call myself the Principled Developer, though, because that's problematic. Can I get everyone to stand up here very, very briefly? It's good to get like a little stretch out. We're going to get our body here. Now, I think Aaron Patterson did this once, and I just thought it was awesome. So I'm gonna take a picture of everyone, all my Ruby friends here. Hey, Ruby friends, hey, everybody. Hey, oh, we got some highs back there. Amazing. All right, slides. Here we go. So yeah, you can stand or sit as you wish here. It's totally great. So the company again is called XPE. This is a slide my boss made. He makes amazing slides. I make slides that look like this. The company, so we had this idea. I read an article in 2011 about cowboy coding and a pink sombrero. And the idea kind of came with me. And well, I don't have a pink sombrero, but I have a little bitty sombrero. And I started using this idea. So the idea with the pink sombrero is that sometimes you do things in production that aren't great, but you still need to do it. So if you're like logging into the production console, what should you do? Well, you put on a pink sombrero. This is back when we had offices. And you're like, oh, something is happening here. And people could go and see what's going on at the desk of the person with the pink sombrero. So I always sort of had this idea of like a place to acknowledge that out-of-process things happen, and you can make a process for your out-of-process things. And now at my company, we get emails that say things like this: I have a mass sombrero request. And at our conference that we had in Kansas City, our Horizon conference, because we do horizontal construction, which is roads, vertical construction we don't do, people love getting sombreros. And it's like totally ridiculous that this sort of blog post turned into a way to manage our out-of-band changes that also, like, people are actually, they have problems when they ask us for sombreros. And yet, here we are handing them out and getting funny pictures. My team in India, I went to go visit in Goa, and also a Squishmallow. Yeah, you know who you are. Now, I wrote a few words here about what sombrero requests are. A sombrero request is basically what I was saying before, when you have a request that needs special handling, and it's just a way of saying, like, something unusual is happening here. What it is not exactly clear. Anyway, and we have a value proposition that we're making with that, is that one of them is that we're tracking and validating a dangerous change. Someone says, like, the invoice is wrong. We paid the person the wrong money. Can you please change it? I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm not going to just change it. We're going to go through a process here to make sure that, yes, it's actually the right change, and it should happen. A lot of words on the slides. Again, I apologize. I'm not great at making slides. They say it matters to know why things went wrong, because then you can help to prevent them. You can make the product better, and you can make the process better. And you acknowledge that it's worth knowing why it happened, not just that you want to get the fix out. And that's how we make the world a better place, one sombrero at a time. Here's an example of an incident that we have in our platform. Joey Bag of Donuts got paid the wrong amount. It actually should have been Jamie Bag of Donuts, no relation. And we have some line items there: correct the shift's driver, revise the invoice, and re-export the invoice. Life is funny like that, so I say, you know, wear a funny hat, embrace the process of having out-of-process changes. The company I work for is XBE, X with dashes in it, X-B-E. And I'm on Mastodon as Hazula at Hachyderm.io, and I'm on GitHub as BF4. I'm happy to talk to you, and thanks, everybody.
Hi, y'all. I'm Ken. You can find me at these links here. I'm an intern finishing up at Deepcast, where we're making tools for podcasts. And I'm a Ruby scholar. Really happy to be here. What I wanted to talk about today was touch on Ruby for Good. If you're not familiar with Ruby for Good, we build open source web apps to help nonprofits. You may have heard of CASA and Human Essentials. We're deploying another app right now called Homeward Tales, where we're supporting pet rescues and shelters. And when I started on this project was in January. This is the first PR I worked on. It says, as staff, I can create a pet in draft so it is not visible to fosters or adopters. And this line at the bottom kind of highlights one of the things that I really learned working on this PR and PRs that followed. So looking at the code that existed already in the app, I started to notice a lot of conditionals in the controllers and in the views. Like right here, you'll see this conditional. Over here, we have another conditional. You might be seeing a pattern if you're reading this. All of these conditionals are trying to check the user and basically see, can they do this action? Can they see this information? So just a quick highlight, authentication, authorization are separate things. Authentication answers the question of who are you? Authorization is all about, can you do this? The tools that are common in the Ruby ecosystem for authorization are Pundit, Action Policy, and Can. Action Policy, I really like the defaults it has. I feel like they're very Rails-esque, and so I picked that to rework a lot of the authorization we had in Homework Tales. So when you start on a project and you need some authorization, you might start with a simple piece of code like this, where you just write a conditional and you're checking one thing, like, is this user the author of this record? Then render this. You might need roles, and so you might start adding roles to your users and checking those instead. But the problem with this approach without a framework is that your code starts to get muddled in your views and controllers, where you have all of this business logic living in your views and controllers. We can clean this up by implementing an authorization framework. Again, this is an action policy. That's one of the Evil Martians tools. And so this is a policy-based authorization. We write a class. It can look as simple as this. The method here is named to match with the action show that's in the secret stuff controller. And using very Rails-esque magic, we can match that and just use helpers like this allowed to helper and use that to check in this policy, given whatever you give in this context. In this case, we're not giving any context. Can we render this? You can also do things like pass records, and it can check the class of those records to also match. So there's a lot of magic that really makes this process really easy. You can use these in your controllers. Usually use that with the authorize method. In this case, whenever it returns false from whatever method you're calling in your policy, it'll raise an error, which you could rescue from. In Homework Tales, we've been trying to make these roles that we've created a little bit more clear what the responsibilities of each role is. So we've implemented this pattern, breaking it into permissions. I'll share a link to the code at the end. And here's an example of some more helpers that action policy includes, like pre-checks, where you can run the same check on every single rule that you define inside your policy. I'd like to thank Vlad, who wrote action policy. His book, Layer Design for Ruby on Rails Applications, if you're interested in authorization, I highly recommend that. And thank you, RubyConf. Thank you, Ruby Central. Thank you, everyone here.
Anyways, my name's Gary too. I work for Hack Club, and today I'll be sharing about my top 5 favorite Ruby gems. Honestly, this talk is kind of for myself. It'll give me a list of gems to install whenever I start a new side project that I'll inevitably never finish. But maybe it'll be helpful to you as well. To kick things off, well, actually first, these gems are intended to be slightly less known. They're really handy, but might not be in everyone's gem files, so this is why I'm sharing them. To kick things off, I have a little known gem that helps you build websites. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. Okay, anyways. The actual first gem is Awesome Print. It prints objects and makes them a little bit easier to read. So instead of doing puts or print, you could simply just call AP instead, and it'll basically do indentation, color, and everything. It's really handy for hashes or arrays. The only downside is that the output can get a little bit long since it is doing all that formatting. But other than that, it's a gem that I always love to install. You might notice that on the top right of each slide, I'll have a QR code. So if you want to check out its GitHub repo, feel free to do so. The next slide that I have here is hash ID. So hash ID is a way to obfuscate your auto-incrementing IDs. It kind of helps prevent enumeration attacks because it makes it so your IDs are not available to users. So as you can see, in your URLs, you'll have a string instead of a numeric ID, and those are generated based on the numeric IDs in your database. It's important to know that these hash IDs actually are not hashes, they are reversible. But it is possible to make it harder to reverse by setting a hash or a pepper. The next gem I have is discard. It's a gem that helps you with soft deletion. This is really handy if you have users that might accidentally delete a record and want it undone. So instead of calling destroy, you call discard, and now set a discarded at column, and that will essentially just mark your record as discarded. You can use a scope called kep to filter out those discarded records, which that's kind of how soft deletion works. And the tricky thing here is that if you're trying to delete associations, that can get a little bit difficult. The recommended way is to have a scope inside your record that does a join and then essentially filters out any discarded parents. So that's something to look into. Discarded takes a different approach than paranoia or access paranoid, which is I think a lot of people have heard about or before. The different approach is that they don't override any active record methods such as destroy. It also doesn't set default scope. The second to last gem that I have is called AASM. This is Access State Machine, and it's my favorite way to handle state in models. There are many different ways out there. You can use multiple timestamp columns. You can use enums. However, the benefit that AASM has over those two methods is it'll protect you from invalid state transitions. So let's say you have, in this case on the screen, we have a terminated state. You also have an approved state. Let's say you can't go from terminated to approved. AASM will help protect you against that when you define your states and your valid transitions. And additionally, it'll also help you set timestamp columns. So if you love to have an approved at, it'll automatically fill that in for you. And then the last one I have is paper trail. It keeps a log of who, what, and when did an action. So it's really handy if you're going through the Rails console and you have to kind of debug what happened. This gives you a great way to kind of see the timeline of all the events that happened within a record. The downside is that I found it can be difficult to query for specific data since it's all within an association called versions, and you have to kind of filter for that. And the key thing to know is that if you're using encryption gems such as Lockbox, you may have to explicitly omit omit encrypted columns. Otherwise, you might track plain text secrets, which would be bad. So yeah, those are my top 5 favorite Ruby gems. My name is Gary, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, so tooling over documentation, why that's the subject that I'm passionate about. Some short stories about MKI CLI. So MKI CLI is a command line dev tool suite for Meraki programmers. It is installed by default on Programmer Dev Box, and it is made to simplify my life first, and by extension, hopefully, every Meraki programmer's workflows and life. Why would you ask, right? Like, why creating a CLI for your company? Well, when I joined Meraki, I had like a lot of experiences, and I wanted to share the good recipes I discovered. Traditionally, it would be going through like a script folder in our monolith, but I found that like having autonomous CLI would be way more practical. It's also helping speeding up, ramping up new employees. It also have this beautiful thing of unifying developer experience. Something that is like really nice, like you want to have kind of like the same elevated experience when you're a developer
if you have like a lot of scripts that are like made by different people, they don't have necessarily the framework behind or the good habits or a standard to write these scripts. So like if you have like a CLI or a particular repo with all these recipes, you can set a standard and create like a better developer experience. Simplify workflows. This is kind of like self-explanatory. When you create scripts, you might just not create like the best workflows, and like if it's centralized and better looked at, it can be more simple to work with. And finally, facilitate discovery. Our script folder is kind of like a mess. It has like hundreds of scripts and not always like super well named. Naming is hard. But yeah, having like a CLI helps with that. By default, there's the -h option that makes it like super easy to document and also discover all the comments that you have. Yeah, so I wanted to also like share with you like some principles I kind of like came up with for writing this CLI. And so it needs to be easy to contribute to with core methods available to all commands. So like sort of a framework, right? Always list what is the next step. Document inline what commands do, particularly with like -v, which is verbose, and be transparent about it. Add links to extended documentation for curious people, but this is not required. And then use as much context as possible. If you're like a repo, you have a change ID, a SHA-1, whatever, and you want to like do something with that, just like pull it from the context. Don't ask like the user to like do that work. And offer optionality, of course, what can be useful for the user. And then use emojis and similar. Sometime like you have like, you know, like a script, it hangs and you don't know if it's like bugged or if it's like doing something. Have a spinner and just show it. Use emojis because it's fun. And direct to the point, keep verbosity under like -v or -debug. All right, yeah. So next step, that's an example, 2FA for instance. We have a lock system and then MKL lock info merge. Each time I would do that, I would forget to look at my phone for like Duo, like it's a 2FA, a two-factor authentication. I would always forget. And then like 30 seconds later, I would be, oh yeah, I need to see my phone. Okay, so now it's there. It tells me like, check my phone. I also added dogs because it feels like a little boring. So use spinners, right? Like we have like MKI bundle and style. We have like several environments because we are like upgrading. And so, yeah, that's really nice to see. Like it's ongoing. Inline doc, like, is it like better to have like the left one or the right one, right? You're in your terminal, you don't want to like go to like Confluence or like whatever wiki, you have inline doc. I will go through that really quick, but yeah, that was it.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is the most efficient lightning talk session I've ever been to. So first, can we give a shout out to Sarah? All right. I am always kind of a pain in the ass. Before Sarah was texting me before, like, are you coming? I was like, I'm coming. I'm just a little bit late. Finished the little graduation thing. Thanks for coming around this evening. My name is Jeff Casimir. I'm the executive director of the Turing School. You got to hear from some of our great alumni. And I also somewhat confused the AV people when I was like, I don't need a computer. And they're like, but what about your slides? And I was like, slides, I hate them. So I want to give a little lightning talk to you tonight, kind of following on some of the things that Matt was talking about yesterday. He said that the Ruby community is unique in the way that people bring love into this space, into the work, you know, and for those of you who have been in other programming spaces, I hope that it does feel different to be here this week. And I think love is such an interesting word for programmers, right? Where we're supposed to be like doing nerd stuff behind our computers, and instead people are talking about feelings. And love really, the idea of love is like reckless. It's essentially unwise and dangerous. Like when you put love into things, when you allow yourself to love, you set yourself up also for hurt, right? When we mix our work and our identity, like when we say, I am a Ruby developer, we're necessarily opening ourselves up to a degree of vulnerability. This is a quick community participation moment. If you or someone you care about has gone through a layoff in the last 2 years, give me a quick boo. Boo! Sucks. And it hurts not just because of the uncertainty, not just because the financial impact for people, but because it really like violates trust. You know, it violates the effort, the care that we've put into the work that we do, to the people that we work with, and then they're gone. And maybe it was you who had to find a transition, you know? And if it was, I'm glad you're here today. The obvious answer is just to care less, to say like, I'm just here to code. It's just programming, it's just work. It's essentially just exchanging hours for money. But really, that's no way to live, you know? It's not the way that we here, I think, choose to do it. It's not what brought you to RubyConf. You could be at home right now. This is a late session, Sarah, okay? If today, however, in joining into this space, you had a conversation that brought you a little bit of joy or helped you think differently about an idea, could you give me a quick woo? Okay. Back here, I don't know who y'all been talking to. We gotta get you some better conversations. It's quiet back there, but no, you're good. If I ask you to step back for a moment, back to when you first entered into these spaces, maybe it was a first meetup, a first conference, etc. There was probably a friend or teacher who helped you write your first lines of Ruby. Maybe it was some wild comic book, ridiculously called a poignant guide, or it was some other path where someone put a little bit of their love out there, sharing their interest and passion in this space with you. Yeah, I think about this French singer, Edith Piaf, said, when you reach the top, send the elevator back down. And I think when Mats is talking to us yesterday, trying to set the tone for these conversations and these spaces, it's a reminder of like how it came to be this way, that it's not by accident. It's like through this care and appreciation. You know, when we talk about like being nice, nice isn't really enough. Nice isn't what love looks like. To send the elevator back down really means like proactive, taking steps we don't have to do, putting ourselves at risk, doing things because we want to. So here are 3 quick ways that you can put a little more love into our community. Number 1, you already did it, show up. You're here now, good job. When you show up to local events, to meetups, or join community spaces online, you create space and joy for others. You make it okay for them to be there, and you let them know that like this is a place where we do it, we choose to engage together. Number 2, a little bit harder one, is responding to outreach. I know, you gotta get on LinkedIn sometimes, okay, people? You gotta answer some of those emails. When you talk with someone new, someone you don't know, even if it's just for 15 minutes, you help them believe that there's a place for them here. You help them find their way into this space, just like someone probably did for you. You don't even have a microphone. Okay, I'm gonna be fast. Number 3, remind people of where you come from. You weren't hired for the developer you are today. You were hired in a more junior, less advanced state. And when you try and open the door for someone like that, you make our community a better place to be. This is a special place. The way we keep it joyful is not by protecting it, it's by growing it. To welcome new people in, just like you and I were welcomed in here, even by Sarah, and being bold enough to put just a little bit of love into the world. Thank you.
So this talk will be a little bit more technical, sorry for that. My name is Michal Kazmierczak, and I'm going to talk about self-hosted observability stack for Ruby apps. Let's start with a quick show of hands. I'm gonna ask you 4 questions. The first is very easy. Please raise your hand if you collect logs from your applications. Yeah, almost everyone. Now, please raise your hand if you collect metrics from your applications. Great. Now, please raise your hand if you collect traces on the right side. So breakdown of, okay, fewer. Now, please raise your hand if you have it all correlated. So you can navigate from metrics to logs and okay, very few, but I see some hands. Great. Okay, I believe that telemetry is the best feedback that we can get from production environment. So we developers work in a feedback cycles. So for example, here we have a simplified development cycle where we have stages like local environment, CI, test environment, and production environment. And for example, on local environment, our feedback loop is produced by tests. So when we make a code change, we run tests to see if the change does what it's intended to do. The further in this process, the more difficult it gets to get good quality feedback from the next stage. So if you pay attention, if you care about your tests, because that's your productivity tool during the development, I think you should also strive to have a high quality telemetry data from the production environment, because that's your productivity tool when you debug production issues. Yeah, why to bother? Why to create your own observability stack? Because I've noticed that we were trained that observability very often gets reduced to choosing a vendor, installing a gem, and adding some API key, pushing it to production, and job done. When you do a small stretch and you work a little bit with some open source projects, you can gain a lot of knowledge how it works under the hood. Yeah, it sounds like a very common buy versus build problem. So is it better to buy off-the-shelf product, or is it better to build something by gluing some open source projects? I know it's very nuanced, and you have to evaluate it for yourself. However, I highly encourage everyone to give it a try, because as soon as you try, you will notice that you probably use pretty much the same tools that your vendor does. Yeah, it's actually good, but yeah, that's a fact. This is a typical observability pipeline. So it all starts with instrumenting your application. Then there's collector, which receives the data. Here also you can apply some transformations like sampling or aggregation. Then all the data gets pushed to storage service where it's persisted. And it also the data is exposed by Query API. And then this data can be accessed with some dashboards and alert managers. I have demo and I have 1 minute. I will give it a try. Yeah, so here I have very simple race application with some endpoints. And I have a K6 script which will simulate some load. So I will run my K6 script and I will go to my local Grafana instance. I will go to some dashboard and we should see some data coming in soon. Yes. So here we have latency heat map, which is basically a histogram of latencies. And here I can see that there is one endpoint that is very slow. It takes P99 is 2 seconds. So from here I can go to logs all related to this endpoint. And from those logs I can go to traces to see what was that slow. So this is a breakdown of what is happening during this endpoint. And this is all offline. I'm not connected to any Wi-Fi. This is just, yeah, if you are interested, I pushed this setup to a GitHub repo. You can check it out. And yeah. And thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just realizing that the speaker notes aren't showing, but hello, Ruby friends. How's everyone doing?
You'll need to extend it.
All right. Hello. I'm going to try to make this short and sweet because we got happy hour after this. And the reason I'm here is to hang out with all of you guys and not just talk. My name is Justin Bowen, and I'm tons of fun on the internet. I've been doing Ruby for 17 years. In the last 10 years, I've been doing computer vision with Python. And the last 3 years, I've been doing diligence for acquisitions and investments with private equity and venture capital firms. And last year, I spent some time working as a staff AI engineer at a large 8-year-old, well-funded Rails shop with a Rails monolith. And I worked on Next.js with Vercel's AI SDK. And that's not really what makes me happy. What makes me happy is writing Ruby. I am located in San Francisco, and I live there with my wife and my 2 cats. Oh, and I am the creator of ActiveAgent. So before we get into ActiveAgent, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Ruby toolbox. You know, the Ruby toolbox is something that's been around for a while. I'm pretty sure it's something Ruby Central maintains, and there's usually always a gem for that. Whatever you're doing, there's a gem for that. But with the real-time computer vision I was doing, there wasn't a gem for that. And until last year, when I worked with Andrew Kane to fix the Onyx runtime Ruby library that he made, we weren't even able to use GPUs to do inference for computer vision in Ruby. We can now, and it is just as fast as it is in Python. So what I want to do is advance Ruby's AI dev tooling. And I'm working with Ruby Central on forming a working group to do just that, so that we can get sponsorships for grants to write proposals to do open source and get paid to do it. So, ActiveAgent. ActiveAgent is a comprehensive AI framework for building AI apps in Rails. ActiveAgent is more than just a cool-looking Ruby gem. Agents take on the persona of different operators to perform actions and complete their objectives using tools based on the instructions that you give them. They can even behave like a cowboy, like our friend in the back with the cowboy hat. Howdy, Ruby friend. He will show you how to open source. And so ActiveAgent is made up of action prompt, which allows you to define action methods, just like you do in any other abstract controller, like action controller or action mailer. Your action methods become tools that your agent can call to render information to the user in generative UI, something I got from Next.js, and also retrieve information. And with the generation provider, you're able to interface with different generation provider backends like OpenAI, Anthropic, all with a single symbol change and a string change for the model. With queue generation, you can just generate later, just like you deliver later with a mailer. And with streaming, you can stream content back to your agent or to the user. With action prompt, that's a typo. With action prompt, you get dynamic prompts and generative UI. So the generation provider is that common interface to interact with OpenAI and more. And streaming with, last slide's the most important. If you want to learn more about the Ruby AI Working Group or ActiveAgent, you can sign up for the newsletter and you can find the repo, test it out, contribute, give feedback. Pull requests are welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I realized that I did that exactly the same as I'm doing that every time. So I came with the lightning talk. I decided to do it one and a half hour ago. And it's the same like my yesterday talk that I was on the speaker agenda not even a week ago. So I'm again here. And yesterday I have a talk about Ruby Europe and why the community is so important and why the local meetups are that important. And there were so many questions, so I decided to bring my old presentation to show you why it's important to attend those local meetups, to present on those local meetups, and why it's so important to organize them. So let's start with the attending. So it's worthwhile attending, especially when we all now working remotely. It's really good to meet each other in person. Your exposure to the new ideas, new tools, new best practices, and these exposures inspires you. You can bring your idea for your lightning talk, or maybe your open source, or even startup. And you can find mentors there or support others in their careers. And there is also a really important part, which is most important for me. It's this build relationship with these like-minded professionals. You can discover job opportunities and collaboration on those local meetups. And you can make a lot of friends. You're meeting with those people every month for 2-4 hours to drinking beer, talk to them, and you can learn also something in the meantime. And why it's so important to present it? You're contributing back to the community by sharing your expertise. You establish yourself as an expert in that topic, and I can highlight from my expertise how important it is when the candidate has proven in their resume that they have presentation or articles written already. And doing a presentation is also really important to improve your communication skills. So you learning how to communicate, how to speak to people, and it's really difficult to explain something complex to those who are not familiar with the topic. And this skill can be helpful for you when you're talking with your client or not technical client, and in your team in general. And these skills are really important, especially now in this AI era for all of us, for engineers. And teaching is also learning. And why it's so important to organize? You develop your leadership and organization skills. You're building visibility and trust. You get new talents. Don't be afraid of that. Companies make a big effort in contributing into the community to get back to get talents, to attract potential coworkers. And you create a supporting environment for other people to grow, to stimulate also your team and your community. And remember to don't go alone, to find people, to find other organizers. They can help you co-organize, sponsor, and bring people, repost, or present something. And believe in your effort. So whatever you attendee, presenter, or organizer, or any other contribution into our community, I will tell you a short story. So former CTO of Visuality, around 9 years ago, decided to make a small course on the university. He showed up, and he might be disappointed seeing only 6 people on the lecture hall. All those students was on the technical university, and they had classes but they had programming classes, but not in Ruby. Maybe few of them, but all those people wanted to develop, they wanted to explore and willing to improve, to grow. And you know what? At least 3 of them are still Ruby developers. And one of them is Yaroslav, the creator of SuperRails channel. Maybe you know him. He's a speaker on the conferences like Rails World, Euroco, Wrocław.rb, and multiple other conferences. What an incredible career. And everything thanks to Shakir, the CTO effort to bring Ruby to those several young people. And keep going. Believe that this impact might be not immediately, but it will be in the future. And all of us are important. And let's go drink something together.
Does anyone have a 1-minute talk that they would like to do with no slides? Come up and do it right now.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Hill. I snuck on stage during Drew Bragg's keynote this morning. The whole theme of the conference for me has been community and that kind of... So anyways, I have been working on a podcast the last couple of months called Ode to RailsConf. It's been kind of growing out of the announcement that RailsConf is coming to a close next year. And the community has been the big through line for me through these various episodes. Every episode is a new person I interview about their experiences at RailsConf. When the announcement came that that RailsConf is ending, I started to feel very nostalgic and, oh, remember when, and these experiences and encounters that I had with people that I admired and wanted to have a chance to work with, and those types of stories that I started to kind of share and talk with other people about, and kind of had this epiphany, well, maybe other people in the community have those types of stories too, and those types of things that they would like to share and be nostalgic about. So please come listen to the podcast.
Perfect, a perfect talk. Any other takers?
Hello, glorious people of RubyConf. I'm Schneems. Howdy. Who would like to contribute to open source? Who would like to contribute more to open source? Who would like to be the most amazing open source contributor in the history of all open source contributions? So, I have a book that is all about open source contributions. It is howtoopensource.dev, and I have a discount code here that will make it free to download. So you can come up and QR code it. I'm gonna leave it like right over here. So it's also, I put it in the event Hackday Slack. The code is Hackday 2024, and the URL is howtoopensource.dev. Also, yep, okay. Gong. Thank you.
Any other takers?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rhiannon Payne. I'm just going to use this as a quick opportunity to introduce myself if you don't already know me. I run a marketing agency called Seafoam Media, and recently, as of 3 or 4 weeks ago, I started leading marketing for Ruby Central. So I love this community. I have been going to Ruby and Rails events for the past 2 years now, 2.5 years. And just like the warmth of this community is so incredible, and it feels so good now to be part of, hopefully creating really cool resources and, marketing and different things that can really benefit the community and the ecosystem. So if anyone has ideas for things you would like to see Ruby Central do in the future in terms of marketing or anything else, talk to me or find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Would love to hear from you. And yeah, I think there's a lot of cool stuff that we as an organization can do to continue to support all of you better. So happy to be a part of this, and thank you guys so much.
All right, we have space for one or maybe two more. I see one.
Okay, my name is Cindy Backman. I'm the current owner of Confreaks. And Confreaks was started in 2007 by Kobe Ranquist and Charles Youngblood. And it was started because they were at a conference, one of the first ones that Matt spoke at in the US. And afterwards, they were like, oh my gosh, there was so much information. He actually had 400 slides at that talk. And so they decided they wanted to film Ruby events and started Confreaks. My brother is Kobe. I bought the company from him in January of 2020. I've worked with Confreaks since 2012, and we've filmed RubyConf since 2007, RailsConf since 2012. If you ever have questions, need help, I love the Ruby community, I want to help, and I'm Confreaks.
All right, I'm sorry, everybody, but we got to wrap it up. Thanks so much for being here today. Thanks so much to all of our speakers. And have a great time at the happy hour.
This concludes today's session.